All right, listen, if you are struggling to resolve conflict in your relationship, but you think that you're communicating well, it could be that your communication sounds a lot more like this.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping.
Then it does this.
And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land.
If that's the case, don't worry, I got you covered in this video. We talk a lot about communication, but maybe more important than just the words that we're saying or the tone that we're using is the climate in which the communication is taking place. So in this video, I want to give you 4 areas to help you evaluate the communication climate of your relationship. And when you understand that, your communication will improve and you'll be able to resolve conflict. That's today on Relationshots. Hey, welcome to Relationshots. If this is your first time here, welcome to the place to get practical relationship advice that actually works in your relationship. If you have not already done so, you can download a free guide to intimacy below. If you need help in communication, and I assume you do because you're watching this video, my online communication course called Closing the Communication Gap is phenomenal. Will help you accomplish what you want in your relationship. 4 videos, 19 modules, 12 worksheets, all geared around helping you understand how your partner speaks, evaluate the communication climate, and come up with a way for you guys to communicate in a healthy and effective way throughout your relationship. You can see a description link for that below as well. So let's talk communication. We know communication is essential if you're going to have a healthy relationship. Communication is essential if you want to resolve conflict, but communication and conflict resolution will not occur if you do not first address the climate in which the communication is taking place. Professor and author Dr. Tim Muehlhoff says that anytime 2 people begin talking, a communication climate is started. And what that is that's the engagement, the values, the perspectives, how they view each other, how they view the relationship, all of that kind of stuff comes into play with communication. You can be eloquent, you can say all the right things, but if the climate ain't right, you're going to have a hard time resolving conflict and communicating effectively. But if you evaluate your climate and you correct the areas of your climate that might be off, then you can guarantee that you'll have effective communication. So I want to give you 4 areas when it comes to the climate in which you're communicating in for you to evaluate in your relationship. If you get these right, I promise you, you will communicate effectively. So the first area I want you to consider is acknowledgement. Listen, acknowledging somebody is the most confirming type of communication possible. If you acknowledge the other person, if you acknowledge their perspective, they will hear you and they'll actually be interested in hearing what you have to say. So it's things like eye contact, things like touching, where you are affirming, you're asking questions, you're getting clarity, you're affirming the other person. Acknowledgement does not mean that you agree with their perspective. It simply means that you are validating their perspective as legitimate, that is actually legitimate, and it's valid that they could feel a certain way and have a certain perspective, even if you disagree with it. If you do not first get acknowledgement right, communication will deteriorate because the climate will not be ready for them to want to receive or hear what you have to say. A second area I want you to evaluate is trust. This is pretty simple. But if there's a lack of trust in a relationship, when you communicate, what the other person will do is they will be suspicious of what you're actually communicating, and instead they'll be looking for the unstated, real answer that lies under the surface. And once you have broken trust, and there's suspicion, and there's distrust, it will be impossible for them to really receive what you're saying. They're always going to doubt it. They're always going to be suspicious of what you're saying. They may hear what you're saying, but they go, I don't know if I trust what you're saying. If I don't trust you, I'm going to have a hard time believing what you're telling me. And instead, I'm going to look for unstated, under the surface meanings instead of what you're actually telling me. And what you may be telling me may be truth, but I don't trust you, so I don't know if I can trust what you're telling me. A third area to evaluate is expectations. Expectations are the bedrock of every relationship. You have expectations of your partner has expectations of you. In fact, our words evoke expectations alone, right? If you use words like wife, kids, husband, boss, father, pastor, right? Those evoke expectations of how that person should interact and behave with me, right? I should have a greater expectation that my wife would care about my well-being than my boss would care about my well-being. If I say I'm paying for my kids' college, I'm certainly going to have expectations around them attending class, getting good grades, and actually being respectful to me, right? There's expectations around words. Our expectations will either create a positive or a negative environment in which our communication is going to go. So we've got to understand what expectations are with one another because it will impact our climate. And a fourth area to evaluate is commitment. Listen, if you don't have commitment, you don't have future hope for the relationship. And if you don't have future hope for the relationship, you're going to wonder if things get too difficult, if that person's going to be around. And if you don't know if the person is committed to you, if they're going to be around if things get difficult, guess what you're not going to do? You're not going to have difficult conversations. You're not going to communicate about the things that are frustrating you. You're going to avoid conflict in the relationship because you don't know if they're fully committed. But if you know the other person is committed, it creates an environment where now I can have hard conversations with you. I can fall short and mess up. I can get into conflict with you, and I'm not worried that the outcome of the relationship, that the stability or security of the relationship will be impacted because I know we have a commitment. So those are 4 areas that are going to impact the climate, which will impact your ability to communicate and your ability to resolve conflict. As I mentioned before, my course, Closing the Communication Gap, has a whole module on getting a healthy climate, understanding what erodes a healthy climate and how to establish a healthy climate. If you're struggling in your communication, I promise you, you want to check out that course. If we can help you in any area of your relationship, we'd love to be a part of your relationship journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this video and what you found that either helps or hinders the climate of communication in your relationship. Drop a comment. Let's have a conversation about that below. And until next time, I'll see you right back here on Relation Shots.